Clint Barton was no stranger to the mysteries of the Texas plains, but nothing could have prepared him for the events of that warm summer night. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in strokes of fiery orange and deep purple, Clint rode his horse back to the ranch, ready to call it a day. But a sudden, strange light in the distance caught his eye, a pulsating glow that seemed out of place against the dusky landscape. Compelled by a mix of curiosity and caution, Clint urged his horse towards the source of the illumination. As he approached, the ground beneath him vibrated slightly, and the air filled with a faint, unfamiliar hum. Rounding a ridge, he came upon a scene that looked like it belonged in a science fiction novel. A sleek metallic craft, its surface shimmering under the last rays of the setting sun, sat nestled in a makeshift clearing, its presence unmistakably alien. As Clint dismounted, the craft's hatch opened silently, and from it emerged a figure that took his breath away. She was tall and lithe, with skin that seemed to absorb the light around her, giving her an ethereal glow. Her hair was a cascade of what looked like liquid silver, and her eyes, a deep shade of violet, regarded him with a mixture of wariness and wonder. She was dressed in what appeared to be a seamless, shimmering garment that clung to her like a second skin. "Hello there," Clint called out, tipping his hat in a gesture of peace. His voice broke the silence, and the woman, clearly startled but composed, tilted her head slightly, as if trying to understand his words. "I'm Clint," he continued, taking a cautious step forward. "I don't mean you any harm." The alien woman seemed to relax slightly at his tone, though it was clear she did not understand his words. She responded in a lilting, musical language that Clint couldn't hope to comprehend, yet her tone conveyed a cautious friendliness. The encounter marked the beginning of something Clint knew would change his life forever. He gestured towards his ranch in the distance, offering her a smile. "Come on then. Let's get you somewhere safe. We'll figure this out together." The journey back to the ranch was filled with a tense but curious silence. The alien, whom Clint had started thinking of as Zara, a name that seemed to fit her graceful demeanor, looked around with an intense curiosity that mirrored his own. Every so often she would touch things: the leather of the horse's reins, the rough bark of a tree, the cool surface of a metal gate, with a childlike wonder that made Clint see his world through new eyes. Once they reached the safety of his ranch, Clint showed Zara around, keeping things simple. He introduced her to the basics of his world: the barn where the horses were kept, the sprawling fields where cattle grazed, and the modest farmhouse he called home. Zara observed everything intently, her eyes occasionally widening in amazement, especially at the sight of the horses, which seemed to fascinate her. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the stars come out, Clint tried to communicate through simple words accompanied by gestures. He pointed to himself, Clint, and then at her, inviting her to share her name. After several attempts, she seemed to understand and pointed to herself, repeating with perfect clarity, "Zara." Clint nodded, repeating her name with a smile. "Zara. Nice to meet you, Zara." The language barrier was significant, but Clint found that patience and a willingness to understand went a long way. He brought out an old atlas showing her maps of Earth, pointing to Texas, and then gesturing around to indicate their location. Zara was quick to catch on. She returned the gesture by sketching in the dirt with her finger, an intricate series of circles and lines that Clint guessed represented her home. As the evening wore on, Zara seemed to grow more comfortable. She mimicked Clint's actions, from sipping water to leaning back in her chair to gaze at the stars. It was during one of these quiet moments that Clint noticed her looking at him not with curiosity, but with something deeper, more personal. It was a look that made his heart skip a beat, the boundaries of their worlds blurring under the vast starry sky. That night, Clint lay awake, thinking about the turn his life had taken. Zara, an alien princess, was sleeping under his roof, a guest from the stars who had crashed unexpectedly into his life. It was a lot to take in, but as he listened to the peaceful sounds of the night, Clint felt a profound sense of wonder and possibility. Whatever reasons had brought Zara to Earth, he was determined to help her, to learn from her, and perhaps to find out just how deep the connection between them could go. The days that followed blended into a routine of sorts, as Clint and Zara shared their knowledge and explored their differences. Clint continued to handle the daily workings of his ranch, but now with Zara by his side, each mundane task seemed infused with new life. Her fascination with Earth's wildlife and the ranch operations brought a fresh perspective to his world. And in turn, he was captivated by her stories of distant stars and advanced civilizations. As they spent more time together, Clint began to notice subtle changes in Zara. She seemed more at ease on Earth, adapting to human customs and even picking up bits of English. But there were moments when her gaze would drift to the horizon, her violet eyes filled with a wistful longing. It was during one of their evening walks when Zara finally opened up about her life beyond Earth. "I am a princess," she confessed as they watched the sun set over the plains. "But not in the way your stories depict royalty. My responsibilities are to my people and to the alliance of planets we protect." She spoke of her duties with a mix of pride and burden, her voice tinged with a sadness that Clint hadn't noticed before. Her revelations explained the regal air about her, the confidence with which she carried herself, and her deep knowledge of the universe. Clint listened, his respect for her growing. Here was a woman, a princess, who had seen worlds beyond his imagination, yet she stood beside him with genuine interest in his life, his world. As their bond deepened, so did their comfort with one another. One crisp evening, as they rode back to the ranch after a long day of mending fences, Zara suddenly pulled her horse to a stop. The stars were just beginning to twinkle in the twilight sky, casting a soft glow over the landscape. She turned to Clint, her eyes capturing the last light of the day. "You know," she whispered, leaning closer to him, her voice low and seductive, "I can ride you hard like a girl from my planet would." Her words, unexpected and boldly flirtatious, sent a thrill through Clint. He was taken aback, his cheeks warming under her intense gaze. The moment hung between them, charged with an electric excitement. Clint's heartbeat quickened as he looked at Zara, seeing her not just as the alien princess he'd been helping, but as a woman, bold, beautiful, and utterly captivating. He chuckled softly, the tension breaking as he leaned in closer. "Is that so?" he teased, his voice husky. "Well, I might just take you up on that challenge." Zara laughed, a melodic sound that echoed across the open field. She nudged her horse forward, and Clint followed, the playful banter continuing as they headed home under the canopy of stars. That night marked a turning point in their relationship. What had started as a friendship born of circumstance was quickly blossoming into something far deeper and more intimate. Back at the ranch, their evenings extended into nights spent under the stars, talking about everything and nothing. Zara taught Clint about her world's technologies and philosophies, while Clint shared more personal stories of his family and his dreams. It was during one of these nights that Clint realized he was falling in love with Zara, not just with the princess from another world, but with the woman who could whisper galaxies worth of secrets into his ear, making him yearn for more. The growing closeness between Clint and Zara evolved further one clear night, as they lay side by side on a blanket in the pasture, the sky a canvas of glittering stars. Zara had become increasingly curious about human emotions and physical connections, and under the vast Texan sky, she felt a freedom to explore these new sensations. Clint showed her how to find the constellations, tracing the shapes with his finger. "That's Orion, and there," he pointed, "is Cassiopeia." Zara listened intently, her head resting close to his shoulder, absorbing every word and the warmth of his body next to hers. As the night deepened, the air between them charged with an unspoken attraction, Zara turned to face Clint. Her hand reached out, tentatively touching his cheek. "On my world," she murmured, "we share energy through touch, not just emotion. With you, I feel more." Her voice was a mix of wonder and hesitance, her usual confidence tempered by the newness of her feelings. Clint's response was gentle but firm. He captured her hand, pressing it against his heart. "Here we share through our hearts," he said, his voice low. "And right now mine's telling me I'm right where I want to be." Emboldened by his words, Zara moved closer, and Clint met her halfway, their lips touching softly in a kiss that sealed their newfound understanding and desire. That kiss deepened, becoming more passionate as natural instincts took over. They explored each other under the starlit sky, the world around them fading away. It was a connection that transcended worlds, a physical expression of their emotional bond, leaving them both breathless and yet yearning for more. The days following their night under the stars were filled with a joyful, comfortable intimacy. Clint and Zara found themselves weaving their lives together, blending earthly traditions with alien customs. Clint introduced Zara to the joys of a classic Texas barbecue, where she marveled at the flavors and the communal spirit of his friends and neighbors. In return, Zara shared more of her culture with Clint. She introduced him to her planet's music, a complex harmony of sounds that Clint found both strange and beautiful. They spent evenings dancing to both earthly country tunes and the ethereal melodies from Zara's world, laughing at their clunky attempts to teach each other their traditional dances. Clint also showed Zara the art of horseback riding, which she took to with a natural grace that impressed even the most seasoned cowboys. Her ability to connect with the animals, a trait from her world where communication with nature was inherent, amazed Clint. She, in turn, taught him how to use some of the simple alien tech gadgets she had brought with her, devices that could purify water or enhance the growth of plants. Their relationship, enriched by the sharing of their cultures, began to draw some attention. Clint's friends and neighbors were initially skeptical about the mysterious, otherworldly woman at his side, but her charm and genuine interest in their way of life won them over. Zara learned to make hearty Southern dishes and even participated in local community events. However, not all eyes on them were friendly. The unusual activity at Clint's ranch had not gone unnoticed by local authorities and curious onlookers. Rumors began to circulate, and it wasn't long before the local news picked up the story of the mysterious woman who had appeared in town seemingly out of nowhere. Clint knew they needed to be careful. The world wasn't quite ready to understand Zara's origins or the depth of their interstellar relationship. He made sure to protect her identity, but as the attention grew, so did the challenges. Clint found himself defending Zara's presence more often, reassuring his neighbors and occasionally confronting less friendly curiosity seekers. Despite these challenges, their bond only deepened, rooted in mutual respect and affection. They continued to explore and embrace their differences, finding joy in the diversity of their experiences and views. As they navigated the complexities of their unique relationship, Clint and Zara discovered that love indeed knows no boundaries, not even those between stars. As Clint and Zara's relationship flourished, the quiet life they had been enjoying on the ranch became increasingly strained by external pressures. Word of the mysterious woman at Clint's side had spread beyond the local town, reaching the ears of those who were far more inquisitive and far less forgiving than the townsfolk. A few days after a particularly lively community event, Clint noticed unfamiliar cars driving slowly past the ranch. They were black, unmarked vehicles with tinted windows, the type that didn't belong on a country road. He sensed trouble. His instincts, honed by years of reading the land and its rhythms, were telling him that these new visitors were not just curious. They were looking for something or someone. Back at the ranch, Clint pulled Zara aside. "I think we've got company," he said, his tone serious. "Government types from the look of them. I reckon they've heard the rumors and want to see for themselves." Zara nodded, her expression thoughtful. She had been prepared for this day ever since her arrival on Earth. She knew her presence wouldn't go unnoticed forever. "We need to be careful," she replied, her voice steady but tinged with concern. "If they find out who I am, what I am, they might not react kindly." Clint nodded. He had seen enough movies to know that the government didn't usually handle extraterrestrial encounters with kindness and understanding. "I'll handle this," he said, determination in his eyes. "You stay inside and out of sight. Let me see what they're after." As the sun set, casting long shadows across the ranch, Clint saddled up and rode out to meet the vehicles. He approached them with a calm, confident demeanor, tipping his hat as he stopped in front of the lead car. The window rolled down, revealing a stern-faced man in a dark suit. "Can I help you folks?" Clint asked, his tone polite but firm. The man, who introduced himself as Agent Calloway, flashed a badge but kept it vague. "We've heard reports of some unusual activity out here," he said, his gaze unyielding. "We're just following up, making sure everything is normal." Clint's eyes narrowed slightly. "Well, I don't know about unusual," he replied evenly. "Just ranching out here as usual. Nothing much more than that." Calloway's eyes flicked past Clint to the house, then back to him. "We're looking for someone. A woman, possibly foreign. Have you seen anyone fitting that description around these parts?" Clint's jaw tightened. He knew they were getting closer to the truth. "Can't say I have," he said carefully, "but this is private property, unless you've got a warrant." I'd ask you to leave. Calloway held Clint's gaze for a long moment, then nodded curtly. We'll be back, he said, the threat implied in his tone. As the vehicles pulled away, Clint's mind raced. They had managed to avoid a direct confrontation this time, but he knew the reprieve was temporary. The agents would return, and next time they might not be so polite. The next few days were tense. Clint and Zara took precautions, staying close to the ranch and avoiding any unnecessary attention. But they both knew it was only a matter of time before Agent Calloway and his team returned, more prepared and more determined than before. Their fears were confirmed one night when the sound of engines broke the silence of the Texas plains. Clint grabbed his rifle, his heart pounding in his chest as he looked out the window. Multiple vehicles were approaching, their headlights cutting through the darkness. He turned to Zara, his face grim. It's them. We don't have much time. Zara nodded, her expression calm despite the urgency. We need to create a diversion, she said, her mind racing through possibilities. She touched the small device she wore around her wrist, a piece of alien technology she had been using sparingly. I can use this to temporarily disable their vehicles, but it will only buy us a few minutes. Clint nodded. Do it. We'll make a run for it afterward. As the vehicles drew closer, Zara activated her device. A pulse of energy rippled through the air, and immediately, the approaching cars stalled, their lights flickering out. Confusion and frustration erupted among the agents as they tried to restart their engines. Now! Clint shouted, grabbing Zara's hand. They sprinted out the back door and into the night, the tall grasses of the plains providing cover as they ran towards the safety of the woods beyond the ranch. They could hear the agents shouting behind them, but the delay caused by Zara's device gave them the precious seconds they needed. They ran hard, adrenaline pumping, until they reached the cover of the trees. There, they paused to catch their breath, listening intently for the sounds of pursuit. They could hear distant voices, the agents spreading out in search of them. Clint squeezed Zara's hand. We need to keep moving, he whispered. We can't let them catch us. Zara nodded, her eyes scanning the dark woods. I can lead us to a cave not far from here, she said softly. It's small, but it should be safe for now. They continued their flight through the trees, moving quietly and carefully. Clint's heart was pounding, not just from the exertion, but from the fear of what might happen if they were caught. He had grown to care deeply for Zara, and the thought of her being taken away, subjected to who knew what kind of experiments, was unbearable. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the cave Zara had mentioned. It was hidden behind a thicket of bushes, small but well concealed. They crawled inside, their breathing heavy, and settled in to wait. As they sat in the dark, huddled close together, Clint could feel Zara trembling slightly. He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. We'll get through this, he murmured, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Together. Zara looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. I trust you, Clint, she whispered. I'm afraid of what this means for you, for us. Clint shook his head. Don't worry about me. I'm right where I want to be. With you. They stayed like that for hours, holding each other in the dark, listening to the sounds of the night. Eventually, the voices of the agents grew fainter, and the woods fell silent once more. Clint knew they weren't safe yet, but for now they had each other, and that was enough to keep going. As dawn broke, casting a soft light through the entrance of the cave, Clint turned to Zara. We can't stay here forever, he said quietly. We need to figure out our next move. Zara nodded, her eyes thoughtful. There may be a way, she said slowly. I have a small communication device hidden in my ship. If we can reach it, I might be able to send a distress signal to my people. They could help us. Clint nodded. Then that's what we'll do. We'll get to your ship and send that signal. Determined to see this through together, they prepared to make their move, knowing that the journey ahead would be fraught with danger. But they also knew they had each other, and that was all the courage they needed to face whatever came next. After a tense day hiding in the cave, Clint and Zara knew they couldn't stay hidden forever. The government agents had likely regrouped, and their search would soon widen. Their only hope was to reach Zara's ship and send a distress signal to her people. Under the cover of darkness, they began their journey back across the plains toward the ridge where Zara's craft was hidden. The night air was cool, and the full moon cast a silvery glow over the landscape. making every shadow seem deeper and every sound more pronounced. Clint and Zara moved cautiously, keeping to the cover of tall grasses and low bushes. They had to avoid the main roads and any areas where they might be spotted. As they walked, Zara's thoughts were heavy with doubt. She could feel the weight of her responsibilities pressing down on her. Her time on Earth had been a precious escape, a chance to experience a different kind of freedom with Clint. But now reality was closing in. Her presence here was causing him danger, and she couldn't allow him to suffer for her choices. "Clint," she whispered as they paused to catch their breath near a small grove of trees. "There's something I need to tell you." Clint turned to her, his expression serious. "What is it?" She hesitated, searching for the right words. "When we reach my ship and I send the signal, I may have to leave. My people will come for me, and it might not be safe for you if you're with me when they arrive." Clint's face softened, but his eyes remained steady. "Zara, I don't care about the danger. I care about you. I'm not letting you face this alone." Tears welled up in Zara's eyes, but she blinked them away. She wasn't used to this raw, unfiltered emotion. On her world, duty often came before personal desires, and yet here was Clint, willing to defy all logic for her. "I don't want to leave you," she admitted, her voice barely more than a whisper. "But I'm afraid for you. For us." Clint stepped closer, his hands gently cupping her face. "I've been afraid plenty in my life, but never like this. I'm not afraid of what might happen if I stay with you, Zara. I'm afraid of losing you." She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch, feeling the warmth and the strength in his hands. She could feel the truth in his words, the depth of his commitment to her. "I never expected to find someone like you here," she murmured. "Someone who makes me feel like I belong." "You do belong," Clint said softly. "With me, right here." Their moment was interrupted by the distant sound of vehicles in the distance. Clint tensed, pulling Zara deeper into the shadows of the grove. "We need to keep moving," he whispered. "We're close. Let's go." They resumed their trek, moving quickly but carefully. Zara's heart was heavy, but she was resolved. She knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. They reached the ridge just before dawn, the faint light of morning beginning to paint the horizon in shades of pink and orange. Zara's ship lay hidden in a shallow ravine, its sleek, metallic surface blending almost seamlessly with the rocks around it. Clint let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "There it is," he said. "Let's get that signal out." As they descended the ridge toward the ship, Clint and Zara moved with renewed urgency. The agents were likely still searching for them, and they had no time to waste. Zara quickly accessed the hidden compartment where she kept her communication device. With a few swift motions, she activated it, her fingers flying over the controls with practiced precision. "There," she said, her voice tense but steady. "The signal is sent. It will reach my people, but it may take some time for them to respond." Clint nodded, his eyes scanning the surrounding area for any signs of movement. "We've got to hold out until they get here. We should—" His words were cut off by the sudden sound of a gunshot echoing across the ravine. Clint instinctively pushed Zara behind a large rock for cover, his heart pounding. "Damn it, they found us," he muttered. From their vantage point, they could see a group of agents emerging from the brush, weapons drawn. At their head was Agent Calloway, a grim expression on his face. "Clint Barton," he shouted. "This is your last warning. Surrender now and no one gets hurt." Clint's jaw clenched. He knew they were outnumbered and outgunned, but he wasn't about to let them take Zara. He turned to her, his voice low. "Do you have any more tricks up your sleeve?" Zara shook her head. "My abilities are limited without more advanced equipment. We need to buy more time." Calloway stepped forward, his gaze locked on Clint. "I'm giving you one last chance," he called out. "We're not here to kill anyone, but we need to take her in." Clint stepped out from behind the rock, his rifle at the ready. "You're not taking her anywhere, Calloway," he shouted back. "She's done nothing wrong. She's not a threat." Calloway sneered. "You have no idea what kind of threat she could pose. This isn't up for debate, Barton." Before Clint could respond, another voice called out from behind the agents. It was a local troublemaker named Jeb Parker, who had always been jealous of Clint's reputation, and now saw a chance to make a name for himself. "Hey, Barton," he shouted, stepping forward. "How about a duel? You win, you and your alien friend get to go free. I win, and you hand her over." The agents looked at each other, surprised, but Calloway seemed intrigued. "A duel?" he said slowly. "Are you serious?" Jeb grinned, his hand resting on the pistol at his hip. "Dead serious. Man to man. Settle this the old-fashioned way." Clint glanced at Zara, then back at Jeb. He could see the cocky confidence in the man's eyes, the arrogance of someone who thought he had already won. Clint nodded slowly. "Fine," he said. "But if I win, you call off your search and leave us alone. For good." Calloway seemed to consider it for a moment before nodding. "Deal," he said. "But if you lose, we take her in, no questions asked." Zara's eyes widened with fear. "Clint, you don't have to do this," she whispered urgently. "There's no need to risk your life for me." Clint turned to her, his expression resolute. "I'm not letting them take you," he said firmly. "Not without a fight." They stepped into the open, the agents forming a rough circle around them. Jeb swaggered forward, a smirk on his face. "Ready to lose, cowboy?" he taunted. Clint didn't respond, his focus entirely on the man in front of him. The rules were simple: 10 paces, turn, and draw. As they took their positions, the tension in the air was palpable. The sun was just starting to rise, casting long shadows across the ground. The signal was given and they began to walk. Each step felt like an eternity, the weight of the moment pressing down on Clint. At the 10th pace, they turned, and in a blur of motion, Clint's hand flew to his holster. The shot rang out, echoing through the ravine. Jeb's pistol clattered to the ground as he clutched his shoulder, blood seeping through his fingers. Clint's aim had been true. He disarmed his opponent without killing him. Calloway raised his hand. "That's enough," he said sharply. "Barton wins." The agents hesitated, but Calloway nodded to them, signaling them to stand down. "A deal's a deal," he said reluctantly. "We'll leave you alone, for now." Clint lowered his gun, his breath coming in short gasps. He turned to Zara, a relieved smile breaking across his face. "We did it," he said softly. Zara rushed to him, throwing her arms around him in a tight embrace. "I was so scared," she whispered. "But you were incredible." Clint hugged her back, his heart still racing. "We're not out of the woods yet," he said. "But we bought ourselves some time. Let's hope your people get here soon." As the agents retreated, Clint and Zara remained close, knowing that this was just the beginning of the challenges they would face together. But for now, they had won a small victory, and that was enough to keep hope alive. The tension remained thick in the air as Clint and Zara waited near her hidden ship, their eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of her people. The victory over Jeb and the retreat of the agents had bought them some time, but Clint knew it was only temporary. He kept his rifle close, ready for anything. Zara, meanwhile, was busy with the communication device she had used to send the distress signal. She checked it constantly, her fingers flying over the controls, her face etched with worry. Clint could see the weight of the situation pressing down on her, her dual fear of being captured by the humans and of what her people might think when they arrived. "They will come," she said softly, more to herself than to Clint. "They must come." Clint placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "They'll come," he agreed. "And when they do, we'll figure this out. Together." Hours passed, the sun climbing high in the sky. The stillness of the desert was broken only by the occasional rustle of wind through the dry brush. Just as the tension seemed almost unbearable, a faint hum filled the air, a low, resonant sound that seemed to vibrate through the very earth beneath them. Clint's eyes shot up to the sky and his breath caught in his throat. A ship, sleek and shining with a metallic sheen, descended slowly from the clouds, its design unlike anything made on Earth. The craft hovered silently above them for a moment before a hatch opened, and a ramp extended to the ground. Zara stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She recognized the markings on the ship. It was her people, but not a military vessel. This was a diplomatic craft meant for peaceful missions. Relief washed over her, mingled with a deep sadness. She turned to Clint, her eyes filled with a mixture of joy and sorrow. "This is it," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "They're here to take me back." Clint felt a lump form in his throat. He had known this moment would come, but that didn't make it any easier. "I know," he replied, his voice rough. "But maybe you don't have to go. Maybe there's a way for you to stay here." Zara shook her head, a tear slipping down her cheek. I wish I could, Clint, more than anything. But my duty is to my people. They need me. And if I stay, it could cause more harm than good. Clint pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. I don't want to lose you, he whispered, his voice breaking. I've never felt this way about anyone before. I can't imagine my life without you. Zara hugged him back, her heart aching with the pain of parting. You won't lose me, she whispered back. Not really. I'll always carry you with me in here. She placed a hand over her heart. And I promise, if there's any way, I'll come back to you. The ramp hummed softly, a figure descending. It was one of Zara's people, dressed in a flowing robe that seemed to shimmer like liquid silver in the sunlight. The figure spoke in their native tongue, and Zara nodded, responding with a few words of her own. They understand the situation, Zara explained to Clint. They will not harm you or your people. They came because they sensed my distress. Clint nodded, swallowing hard. Good, he said. That's good. Zara turned to the figure, speaking quickly. The figure nodded and gestured for her to board the ship. Zara looked back at Clint one last time, her violet eyes filled with love. Remember what I said, she whispered. I'll find a way back to you. Clint felt tears stinging his eyes, but he forced a smile. I'll be here, he promised, waiting for you. Zara leaned in, pressing her lips to his in a soft, lingering kiss. It was a kiss filled with all the emotions they couldn't express in words: love, loss, hope, and a promise of something more. Then, with a final, lingering glance, she turned and walked up the ramp. The ship's hatch closed, and the craft slowly began to ascend. Clint watched it rise into the sky, his heart breaking with each passing second. He stood there long after the ship had disappeared from view, the weight of their parting settling over him like a heavy blanket. Weeks passed, and life on the ranch slowly returned to normal, or at least as normal as it could be without Zara. Clint threw himself into his work, fixing fences, tending to the cattle, and maintaining the daily routines that had once brought him solace. But there was an emptiness inside him, a void that couldn't be filled by anything other than the presence of the woman he had come to love. He often found himself staring up at the night sky, searching for any sign of her. He would sit on the porch with a cup of coffee, his eyes scanning the stars, wondering where she was, what she was doing, and if she was thinking of him as much as he was thinking of her. His friends noticed the change in him. They asked if he was all right, and Clint would smile and nod, not ready to share the truth. How could he explain that he had fallen in love with a woman from another world, that he had lost her to the stars? It was too incredible, too personal to share. But Clint held on to hope. He remembered Zara's words, her promise to find a way back to him. And so, each night he waited, keeping that promise alive in his heart. One crisp autumn evening, as Clint was finishing up his chores, he noticed a strange light in the sky. It was a soft blue glow, different from the usual stars. His heart leapt into his throat as he watched the light grow brighter, moving steadily toward the ranch. He dropped his tools and ran, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. The light grew closer, and Clint could see the outline of a familiar ship, a sleek metallic craft descending from the sky. His breath caught in his throat as the ship landed softly in the clearing near the ranch. The hatch opened, and a figure emerged, stepping onto the dusty ground. It was Zara. She was back. Clint's feet carried him forward before he even realized he was moving. He ran to her, his heart bursting with emotion. Zara, he called, his voice breaking. She smiled, her eyes shining with tears of joy. Clint, she said, her voice filled with the same love and longing he felt. I promised I'd come back. They met in a tight embrace, holding each other as if they would never let go again. Clint could hardly believe it. She was real, solid, warm in his arms. He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, his own filled with wonder. How did you... Zara laughed softly, the sound like music to his ears. I told my people about you, about us, she explained. I asked for their help and they granted me this chance to return. They want to learn more about your world, to share knowledge and culture, but most of all, they want me to be happy. Clint grinned, tears of relief and happiness spilling down his cheeks. And are you happy? He asked softly. Zara cupped his face in her hands, her thumb brushing away his tears. I am now, she whispered, leaning in to kiss him again. As they stood there under the vast Texas sky, holding each other close, Clint felt a sense of peace settle over him. They had been through so much, faced so many challenges, but they had come out the other side stronger and more united than ever. Together they walked back to the ranch, hand in hand, ready to face whatever the future held. They knew there would be more obstacles, more adventures, and more discoveries ahead, but they were ready to face them together. For Clint and Zara, love had proven to be more powerful than distance, more enduring than time, and more infinite than the stars themselves. And as they looked up at the sky that night, they knew that their journey was only just beginning, a journey that would take them to the farthest reaches of the universe and beyond, bound by a love that transcended worlds.